You're watching Leafs Morning Take with host Nick Alberga and former NHLer Jay Rosehill. The show starts now.
Wednesday, June 11th, the Wednesday edition of Leafs Morning Take presented by Bet365. It is Nick Alberga, Jay Rosehill, an extra off day here in the Stanley Cup final. What do we do with our time, Rosie? How are you, buddy?
Lots of those off days. It actually works with my schedule pretty good, but it is
Great.
odd not coming at you as fast as we're used to. It's always weird this time of year too, when for what is it, a month and a half at least, you're used to having a hockey game every single night. Who's playing tonight? And bang, bang, they pick them all off, and there's not much left with a little bit of a gap with two teams. It seems like we don't get as much hockey, which is the fact, but I'm looking forward to tomorrow nonetheless.
I will tell you who's having a good time. The media members covering the Stanley Cup final. There are worse places to be to have an extra off day in the Stanley Cup final. Saw a bunch of stuff on social media. People enjoying their time, including friend of the show, Dave Pagnotta, getting a nice tan by the pool yesterday. So, there's pros and cons to covering a cup final that is separated by so much at Edmonton and Florida. But you get a couple extra days in Florida, I'd probably take that.
Yeah, seriously, I don't think any of those guys are complaining. There's another reason on why we're talking about these free agents bouncing around. Where do they want to go? I mean, where would you rather have your extra day, in Edmonton or in Florida? Nah.
Content kings. We're content kings, Rosie. That's exactly what we are. Our Super Chat charity partner this season is Sick Kids. Want to make sure that your question or comment gets on the show? Hit us up with a Super Chat. Proceeds from our Super Chat will go to Sick Kids, ranked the #1 research-intensive children's hospital in Canada and third in the world. And some news coming out on Tuesday night. We could see our big first trade of the summer, and it's the Rangers, the Anaheim Ducks potentially getting together via our very own Frank Saravalli regarding Chris Kreider, a veteran with 2 years left. We talked about him a couple of years ago, potentially linking him to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Doesn't look like it's going to happen, but he's got 2 years left at 6.5 sheets per season. I actually don't mind the move for the Anaheim Ducks if it does happen here.
Yeah, I mean, he's a pretty solid player. I'm not interested in him in Toronto, to be honest with you, just with money and thing. I just don't think it. I don't know, and I can't even really put on paper why necessarily. I just don't think that's that DNA dog that we need to bring in. But I mean, I don't know. When I think of Anaheim Ducks, I just think of Zegras and that video of Getzlaf watching him and someone else do their little dance and hit each other in the nuts with their stick before in their little routine, and Getsy's just sitting there like, what the fuck is going on right now? And I feel like that team's immature and needs some stability from a veteran like Kreider. So we'll look at that. We've also talked about the return of potentially Jonathan Toews and his connection to Quenneville, and maybe being a fit there as that veteran guy who knows how to do things too, to help out that young group who I'm sure is trying to get their way up the standings this year and in the future.
My perception of the Anaheim Ducks has changed a bit the last couple of weeks because of Joel Quenneville going in there. And I'm just very curious to see how they imagine that roster. Pat Verbeek and Joel Quenneville obviously working closely together to try to reform and get this roster headed in the right direction. I think the last couple of years, we're all expecting that next jolt. It never comes. And I think even buying low on a Chris Kreider isn't the worst thing in the world when you look at Kreider, what he can bring to the table, certainly in that perspective. A guy that you're not banking on 40 goals, but if you get close to that value, I think you're looking pretty good on that contract. And there's motivation too, because a year from now, Rosie, he's going to be open for a contract extension. And what have we learned here in the Stanley Cup final? These vets will do something for you, won't they?
Yeah, it'll be fun to talk to Sutsy about that. Just I see a pretty drastic difference, especially down the stretch here the last couple of rounds. And those guys that play with some piss and vinegar, excuse me, and the guys that adopt the playoff hockey and that show up and aren't scared, to be honest with you. I mean, we've seen guys look terrified in the playoffs, look absolutely terrified. A little scrum breaks out and they're literally in the fetal position, holding their head. The only thing they're missing is their thumb in their mouth. And it's just like, you don't have a chance against these guys that play this way. And I think there's kind of a clear line now. It's fairly clear from, the younger generation, the way they played and what they valued and how they stack up in the Stanley Cup playoffs compared to some of those veterans that understand what it takes. And again, we can pick Sutsy's brain about that a little bit, but he's a guy who's played a lot of, quality hockey. And I think he'll help that team out if that rumor actually comes to fruition.
Yes, sir. We got Darryl Sutter coming up in 1 second here at the Leafs Nation 401 on YouTube. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Leafs Morning Take wherever you find your podcast. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review. And don't forget to visit theleafsnation.com. This interview is brought to you by our good friends over at Greta Bar YYZ, the ultimate hangout spot in Toronto. Whether you're catching the big game, diving into some classic arcade action, or grabbing some unreal street food, Greta Bar's got you covered. Planning a team building night or a corporate event, Greta Bar is the perfect place to bring the crew together for good vibes and great memories. For more info, head on over to gretabar.com. That's gretabar.com, 590 King Street West, Greta Bar. Let the gains you bring in as we bring in 2-time Stanley Cup champion. It is Darryl Sutter. Darryl, thank you so much for doing this. How are you today? All right, Del, we're going to try to connect with you. Don't have the audio cooking right now. We'll try one more time to reconnect with you, and we'll go from there. But Rosie, really excited for this interview to get his perspective on the Maple Leafs are going right now.
Yeah, for sure. It's fun with, I don't know. It seems like all the guests that we do have on, it's like, what's your perspective? Sometimes it's the same questions, but people have different answers for it. And based on their perspective and where they've seen them, have you coached against them? Are you a fan? Did you used to play for them? Are you in that market? Like, where are you at? And what's your story? And never short on hot takes about the Maple Leafs this year. But I think Sutsy will have a good one for us. I think he's figuring his audio out here, and we'll have him back shortly so we can pick his brain live.
Do we have you, Darryl?
Yeah, I can see you guys. I can't get volume here at all.
Oh, anything right now? Nothing still?
No.
Okay. We'll try to get our producer's going to give you a call. Okay, 1 second, and we'll figure this out here with Darryl Sutter coming up here on Leafs Morning Take as we look forward to the Maple Leafs offseason. Some free agent targets as well. Rosie should be intrigued by that, and we are going to discuss those free agent targets coming up in a couple minutes, right?
Yeah, a few options for sure this year. Funny, man. Like, there's the obvious ones that stand out. Like, you just take Bennett and Marchand and just place them on the Leafs. I think you have to say that makes the team better. That makes the team look more playoff ready. They have those dogs and those performers and the guys that lead the charge. Is that realistic? I don't really think so. But the more I watch this series and watch these guys play, the more, the quote unquote overpay for, say, Sam Bennett in particular, I'm kind of like, okay, well, that's what it takes. There's a reason you're going to have to overpay, right? He's not some schmuck who's limping around the playoffs right now. He is one of the best players in the world right now, playing the best hockey that there is to play on the planet. Like, there's a reason that everyone's going to juice this guy's number. I understand they've been burnt by that before, but man, when you watch them play, it's just so indicative of what the Leafs have been missing.
Definitely, and I think moving forward, certainly a lot of the conversation will be about some of these veterans, but I think it's timely, too, with these guys playing in the Stanley Cup final, too, right, Rosie? I mean, every night it seems like we're talking about Sam Bennett or Brad Marchand or Corey Perry, and that's just going to light the fire and fuse more in Toronto, no?
Yeah, for sure. And that's for good reason. I mean, obviously the spotlight's on them, but it's like, why are we even talking about those players? It's their performance. Like, it's not easy to perform in those games. You watch the level of intensity in the final this year and the way those guys are going, and it's all kinds of different hockey. It is high octane, high offense, high systems, high pressure, high intensity, high physicality. They're scrapping at the end of you got to show up for that. And to be the guy that stands out and has everyone talking about you, you got to be doing something special. And those guys are, obviously, and just so happens they're UFAs, and everyone's talking how their stock is just skyrocketing right now.
Let's try to reconnect once more with today's guest, Darryl Sutter. Darryl, do you hear us now?
Yeah, I hear you guys good. Can you guys get me?
Yeah, we got you perfectly. We got you. Thank you so
good.
much for doing this. How are you?
I'm good, you guys.
So we're just talking about
Sutsy,
this.
It's good to see you. Go ahead, Nick.
No, go ahead, Rosie. All good.
Yeah, just happy to see you. I imagine you're in Alberta. Are you chasing some cattle around this morning or what?
Actually, we're got everything moved to pasture, and we're just fooling around with some horses. We got kids in high school rodeo and things like that, so we're busy hauling horses around and just kind of in between. It's like out here, we don't start haying for another 3 or 4 weeks, so just trying to catch up. And and watching some hockey and watching some Blue Jays.
Well, it sounds like an all right time of year. Well, Sutsy, we've been talking about Sam Bennett a lot recently for good reason. You caught a bit of his time in Calgary there, and
Yep.
did you know his ceiling was this high as far as being a competitor, or has he just kind of taken off since what you saw of him in person?
I think all of the above, Jay. I think that I was only with him for 2 or 3 months during, and that was that COVID nobody at the games deal, but I got to know Sam good, and I was quite honest. I was disappointed when he was moved to Florida. Really disappointed because I thought he was a classic playoff type player. I think that, and you've seen it in the last three finals for sure. What kind of player he is, and he shows up for work, and he can play with anybody. He can play a couple positions, but his strength is at center, and his strength is really playing against other teams' top players and getting after them.
How do you think Sam Bennett would look in Toronto?
I think he'd be a really good Toronto. I think teams and where the centermen are and where they fit, and Sam's that he's sort of that classic 2/3 centerman, and if there was ever a way that any of that came to fruition, he'd look pretty good there.
Such after watching the Toronto Maple Leafs in the past in the playoffs and them coming up short according to most expectations, there's no shortage of talent on the team. What are they missing that's not giving them the results in the playoffs?
I think they took big strides this year in towards that. I know it's frustrating for Leafs fans, but I think bringing Craig in and team playing more of a playoff style game, I think that, and then adding, I think the two righties on defense and in Chris Tanev and Carlo made a big difference to their team. I just think that going forward, obviously everybody has their opinions, but I just think that their fourth line needs a little more oomph and jam and identity for sure. And then obviously those kids are going to improve. Nyes and McMahon and boys like that are going to really improve. And I think they made a big impact in their team this year. And there's only one way you get better in the playoffs is to play in the playoffs. So you know what, they've got to get past that win the first round thing, and they got to just it's a lot of work, and you got to have the right people to do it. And I think that as I said, I think they made really good strides this year, but the whole thing with the size and the grit and all that has to factor into playoffs. That's how you win cups.
I'm happy you brought up Chris Tanev. The guy's an absolute bulldog. Can you just speak from a coach's mentality, having a guy like Chris Tanev, what that does to your psyche and the way you coach a hockey club?
Yeah, I didn't know Tanny till I obviously went to Calgary. I coached against some lots out in that division, but just getting to know him and seeing what kind of competitor he is and how he prepares himself so well for games and practices, and the way he handles the locker room. And the year that we won the division and then beat Dallas, and then Edmonton beats us in the second round. We couldn't beat Edmonton because Chris Tanev got hurt in the Dallas series, and we couldn't match up against their big guys. So what he brings is it's that old school mentality. You guys know from seeing him every game there what he's like, and you can't win without guys like that, and he makes guys around him better.
Yeah, that's tough to find. We talk about the architect of this team in Toronto at this point, in Brad Treliving. You're no stranger to him. He's got some decisions to make this summer. He says he wants to change the DNA of the team. What was it like working with Brad Treliving, and what do you think he's trying to do specifically to make this Toronto team better?
Yeah, I think we got along really well. I think it was you wish it could have been longer. I think there was lots in the air there with Johnny becoming a free agent and Matthew not signing long term and things like that. So there was a big turnover there in terms of your top end of your lineup. So I think Brad has a really good handle on what it takes, and when he says change the DNA, some of that is just the mindset. And it's hard for Craig and staff to do that in 1 year. It takes time because personnel changes, just because of, you want to put some young guys in there. You want to maybe add to your fourth line, things like that, or change your identity of your back end a little bit more somehow. So there's lots goes into it, but I think Brad is very methodical in that. He has a real clear plan always.
Lots of moving parts, Darryl, over the next couple weeks. We know Mitch Marner is a UFA to be for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Obviously had a really strong all-star career for this Maple Leafs team. We just talked about DNA change. What kind of role does a coach play as free agency draws closer and you look at a player specifically of the ilk of Mitch Marner? And do you think he's the right fit in Toronto? You think it's just time to move on from him?
No, I hope that there's a way that he could still play on their team. But you know what? Guys get to free agency, and when they're 80, 90, 100-point guys, they've had one chance at free agency. There's a good chance that they're going to see what's out there first and foremost. So, I think with John Tavares and Mitch Marner, it's not just big decision that the team has to make. It's big decisions the players have to make. So you can't overlook Tavares as what he gave this year to the team too, in terms of numbers and what he brings in terms of his leadership and character. So, as for going back to the Marner question, though, I'm not sure what happens with him. I don't think anybody is. I think that's a decision that he's going to make with his family and his representatives. So, he's a pretty good player in the league. It's tough to, you just don't, 90-point guys just don't fall out of trees, and so it just depends what they're thinking all the way around.
Mm-hmm. I've noticed there's such a difference between the age of players, the style of player. Feels like some guys need to have the whip cracked, other guys you got to pull back on the reins. So many different personalities in this game and upbringings and way of thinking about the game. When you coach, did you tailor make your approach to each individual player? Did you kind of have a one size fits all approach, get on board with this mentality, or get out of the way?
Bottom line, at the end of the day, Jay, once you go further in your career and you're in it, you're in it to win it. So either you're on or you're off. That's the way it works. And I think that you look at all the top teams that they have a really good leadership group, and most of them have a veteran head coach at least, and that head coach is for sure a lot of ways captain and the leader of the team. So I think that you get the top guys on board and playing a certain way, and that's why I say I think Toronto made strides in that this year, because I think Matthews came a long way and doesn't get enough credit for what he does in terms of the whole deal. So surrounding it and supporting it, I always supported the top guys big time, as long as they were on board with the concept of what it takes to win a championship. And you can only speak from success. And you look at those guys in LA when they won the two cups. Hey, it was the Kopitars and Dowdies and Browns and Gabricks and Justin Williams, guys like they became just like they were like one. They just did it over and over and over, and everybody better get in line. So after a while, your message doesn't matter. Your message, they're the guys that are spreading the message, and this is what we're going to do.
I'm happy you brought that up, Darryl, because you've coached several superstar players you just referenced in your great career. What separates a good player from a true leader in your eyes?
I think nowadays a lot of the leadership is it's sort of the star factor player, and he becomes the captain. He becomes the identity of the team, and that's a big change from even 10 years ago and 15 years ago. And when I coached those teams in Chicago, there were that was Chelios and Ronick and Sutter and Graham and Smith, and just off the top of my head, it goes on and on. Suter, like those guys all could have been captains. That's how they were, right? But they were veterans. Other than Jeremy, those guys were all veterans. I learned a lot from those guys as a young coach, the importance of leadership and experience and all those things. So now I think a lot of the leadership is coming. It's sort of, I wouldn't say ordained, but it's coming with the player as he comes to the team. So it's changed a lot. There's so much going on, and even with the coaching staffs are so big, and and teams, you have to, with the cap, put entry level players on your team. So you're counting on those guys to show their character and their direction. So there's a lot goes into it now.
Suts, you've been a part of a few different organizations in your long illustrious career, both as player and coach. Was there ever a time where you thought you might end up being a Toronto Maple Leaf in one way or the other?
No, but my father, you guys, this is funny, hey, that our dad was a great Leafs fan, and the advice he always gave us when we played Toronto was, I hope you score, I hope you don't get hurt, and I hope to beat the shit out of you. So I think Richie played a little while with the Leafs, but none of the rest of us did. And you know what? When we were growing up, that was the only team we watched because it was black and white. And we only had one channel. So I actually have it in the shop down here. And I think Red Kelly gave it to Dad. It's a signed photo, black and white, of the last time the Leafs won the Stanley Cup in '67. It's signed individually by every player except for Tim Horton and Terry Sawchuk, who both had been killed or died.
Wow.
We are
So
starved.
So the Leafs are still an important part of our fabric here, but it'd be better if they could get a color picture of them with the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, we think so as well. We're absolutely starved for a cup, and you truly feel like this team is headed in the right direction. We talked quite a bit about Craig Berube, Matthew Nye. He's cut from a different cloth. Love what he brings to the table. Do you think they're maybe a couple pieces away from finally doing this thing and pushing through in the Cup playoffs?
I believe strongly they are. I think that, you know what, they're going to, as everybody says, there's probably a little bit of transition again this summer, but I still think they got a couple of really good kids coming. So you know what, the division's tough. You want to win a Stanley Cup, very simple. You got to beat who's the champ. I learned that over and over going to I was in the finals 4 times. You got to beat the champ, very simple. And all the teams that go over the last 10 years or 15 years now, the teams are very similar in style. Like I watched the Panthers play, and they play very similar to how we played in LA. You look past champions, there's a regular season team and there's a playoff team, and then there's 4 teams that go to the Final Four, and you got to figure out how to beat them. I know in LA, our whole thing was we knew we had to probably go through St. Louis.
I think we lost him, unfortunately. I'll just send him a thank you message, and we'll wrap. We were going to wrap anyways, right, Rosie?
Yeah, that's too bad.
Yeah.
He just cut off at the very end, but
yeah,
good talking about old Sutsy, man. He's I know a lot of people that are big fans of him, coaching Calgary for a long time on the Jack Adams there. And I like his approach, man. I think it's nice to see them talk positively about the Leafs and think that they are close and they got the right play, or they're headed in the right direction, I guess. A couple pieces, but like you say, at the end of the day, it just comes down to the players in the locker room to get over that hump and decide to make something special. Like, you got to do something special. You got to get through a tough division. You got to beat a guy that won the cup last year. You got to do, like, there's always something in your way, and you got to rise above it. And I mean, it takes me back to some of the rants I've had earlier this year about, hey, these guys are in, I know there's frustration and you want to see them just dominate the whole league. I get it, but they're in a good place here. I mean, I hate to say they're close, but I mean, you get those Panthers that we're watching to Game 7. Do they have the right DNA to have the right stuff? Well, obviously not. They're not there at the dance, but man, you got to remind yourself sometimes, hey, these guys have got a lot of right pieces in play here, and it's still an exciting time to be a Leaf fan.
And for me, I think it says a lot when somebody of the cloth of the oak, I should say, of Darryl Sutter says he thinks this Maple Leafs team is close and he likes the direction they're headed in. This is a guy who has won in recent memory. All he's done in his career is won, extracted the most out of his star players. Like, that brings a lot of credence to me, at least. Like, I think that's big stuff that Darryl Sutter, out of all people, would say that about this Maple Leafs team. And he's not the type of player, Rosie, who would just say shit for no reason. Like, I genuinely grasped from doing that interview that Darryl does think this Maple Leafs team is pretty damn close to pushing through here.
Yeah, and I like his mentality. I asked him about, like, do you kind of have to tailor make your coaching approach to certain players. And I'm thinking about, my last few years playing when there's like 20-year-olds and whatnot, and it's like you got to coddle this guy, and this guy needs a lot of attention, and this guy's best friends with his agent, and this guy needs a little pat on the bum or he's going to go into his shell every fucking game. It's like, and you ask him, he's like, no, there's one way: get on board or get the hell out of the way. And I just love that. And he's got 2 cup rings to show it, and Jack Adams awards and all the rest of it. And he talks about his team in LA, those, he rattled off all those special players and says they were just one. They were one. And I just love that, because who does that remind you of right now? You watch the Florida Panthers and they are just one. They have one mentality. It's fucking go, and it's get on board or get the hell out of the way. And they got all the guys line after line coming wave after wave doing the same thing. And that sounds a lot like that team in LA where they won cups. And it's a mentality, and it's an identity, and it's a DNA. And I think the Leafs, they have all the talent in the world, but they're missing that, freight train feeling of, you got the tip of the spear with your studs and everyone else falls in behind and you're all pulling from the same rope. And like he says, you are one. And that is what these Maple Leafs, I believe, are missing, whether that's changing up the players to get the guys that can lead that charge. But I think like finally everyone's kind of realizing the pieces in place, as good as they may be, they're not the guys that are going to get this team looking that way.
And I think to that point, I wanted to ask him if there's anybody on this planet who can get him off the farm and back in the NHL. Like he's 66. I think clearly there he still has a lot to give when it comes from the coaching aspect, or even like president of hockey ops. Like I wonder from that perspective, is he finished? Is he cooked? But he seems really, really happy. So probably is finished.
Yeah, those Sutter boys are funny, man. They could be happy as hell throwing bales around the farm and raising bulls and doing all the rest of it, or you could throw them right into downtown Chicago or New York and have them do the NHL lifestyle. But as you see, he's still very, very sharp, knows what he's talking about. He's on top of things. He still follows. I think. I wonder as well. We didn't get a chance to ask him that, but I don't imagine it would take too many phone calls for the right opportunity, and he'd be packing his shit.
Rosie, let's get to these free agent targets. Obviously, we sort of orchestrated and put together this podcast surrounding these free agent targets, who the Maple Leafs could look at in the next couple weeks at the Leafs Nation 401. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. And I think the thing that sticks out to me, Rosie and I got together, and producer Vic comprised a list of names that we feel the Maple Leafs should go after. The theme for me is veteran presence, I would say, Rosie.
Yeah, and why not? I mean, we look at who's dominating right now and who's got that mentality in the final right now. It's all those veteran guys, right, that seem to be moving the needle. I think that they do need a guy that has got some experience and has been around the block a little bit and understands the difference between tiptoeing around and putting your head down and your ass up and making something happen. So it's not really a big surprise that there are some agent or some veterans on our free agent list this morning.
Who would be number one in terms of targets? We've got Bennett, we got Marchand, Ekblad, Perry, Ehlers with Winnipeg. That was your pick. I don't see the fit there, but Taves, Kane, and Duchesne.
That was
number
my
one target
pick.
Be? It was.
I was just rattling off free agents. I didn't say he was my pick, you doughhead. I don't think Ehlers changes the DNA.
I thought you threw him out there because you wanted the Leafs to go after him. I don't like the fit at all. I don't think Ehlers would be.
No, I was just throwing out who are the free agents to talk about. No, Ehlers, I don't think good player and everything, but I could just see it, right? You pay him and you get him here, and he just blends right into the same bullshit, and you didn't change anything. I could see that very, very much. So I mean,
True.
Of the free agents that we've talked about it a ton, and obviously because of what he's doing, but Sam Bennett would be the guy. I mean, so you get Sam Bennett in here, and like if he's doing that kind of stuff that we see, whether you like him or not, and I mean he is so good at straddling that line. I mean he will do the rattiest, dirtiest shit around the net and everything, and then he'll get the defense will get a penalty on him, and he's the one, poking and prodding. He's just a master at that. Then he shows up when he needs to. He's clutch. He'll play physical. He's just like he's just like a machine, man. Even like the look on his face doesn't even change. He's just monotone. Like he's on a mission. He knows what he's going to do, and he does not care what anyone does to try to stop him. He's just going through it. There's a reason his stock is going through the roof. I don't even know if it's realistic for Toronto to get him. Would he want to come here? Is it just about the highest dollar figure? Is he crunching the numbers between like, well, what does that mean net in my pocket, whether I'm in Florida or Toronto? I think like the league's trying to poo-poo that and sweep it under the rug, but he would be an idiot if he wasn't going, okay, what's 8 million in Toronto compared to, or in Florida compared to 10 million in Toronto? And, those numbers are damn near the same, I think, when you crunch the numbers. So people would be crazy to think that that's not a factor in his decision making, but just pure hockey player, potential to change your team and bring something to the table that you're missing. To me, it's Sam Bennett.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely concur with that. I think Sam Bennett would be the top target on my list. But to your point, I think half the league's going to be involved on Sam Bennett. Unfortunately, the names Toronto wants, everybody wants. And that's why I think maybe you look down that list. Brandon Tanev, I think, would be a good look. That's also what stood out in our time with Darryl Sutter, is that he thinks the fourth line needs a bit more juice, a bit more punch. And I couldn't agree more. I think the bottom six in general really didn't have an identity. I know that Lorentz line found it late in the season, but I think just bringing some more character and production too to that bottom six, I think will be integral to the success. But certainly the Bennett stands out. He's having an incredible playoffs. You look at what he can bring to the table, the different intangibles, but we've been talking about it the last couple of weeks. Like if you make that move and you move from Florida to Toronto, the insulation is a lot different. And suddenly you look around you don't have the same type of players, and do you fit in that market? And I'm also genuinely curious to know how Sam Bennett is officiated on a team that's not the Florida Panthers too. It's funny.
Well, it's funny. I mean, people say, oh, we've seen this story before. A guy who gets hot in the playoffs and everyone gets hot and horny for him. You pay him out the ass in free agency. He comes and he's just not the same guy. And people are like, look at his numbers. He's like a max, like he's like a 50-point guy, which is not a 110-point. You know what I mean? But we've had a plethora of those 100-point guys. And when it comes to heavy playoff hockey, not so much. But I do understand the risk of that, and to say overpay and just do whatever you got to do to get the guy. I think that's a little bit short-sighted because, like you say, the insulation they have in Florida, it's not just insulation. It's just like that they've adopted this mentality, and I bet you they're very close. And like when they win the cup that they've won and been to the finals twice and now 3 times, and if they win again this year, I bet you those guys will have this bond and this brotherhood that just lasts the rest of their lives, because they've clearly all bought in and have produced something very special. It's not easy to do that. I think the charge is being led right now by Bennett, just by the production he has, and just watching, you're seeing him just stand out in so many different ways. But will you have that impact on a different team? Nobody really knows. And that's the risk of plucking him from that situation. Obviously, he has the experience. He knows what it looks like, knows what it feels like. But yeah, you throw him in Toronto, like, is he going to have that impact on a team if he were to play that same series on Toronto this year? I don't know. Nobody knows. I guess that's kind of the roll the dice of the thing. But there are some question marks behind it, obviously, from some people who are saying, let's slow down before we're talking 10 million for Sam Bennett here.
Personally, I think the worst mistakes are made around July 1, and there's just so many prime examples of that around the league. And man, the more and more I look at this free agent crop, I think patience is going to be a virtue. I think there's going to be money out there. Who knows if Bennett gets there? The Marner conversation, it's not really attached to the Maple Leafs, in my opinion, anymore. I know Darryl said he'd bring him back, but every coach we've had on in the last year has said the same thing, because it's hard to replace somebody like that. But they also don't know the DNA. The fabric of this team just needs to change. And that's why, I was curious to see some books have the Leafs as the second best odds to get Mitch Marner or re-sign Mitch Marner. I don't view it that way. It would make no sense in my world that they brought Mitch Marner back. But I just think they got to be patient with this thing. Like the thing that scares the hell out of me is the Leafs potentially blowing their load around July 1 and just bringing guys in for the hell of it because they feel this rush, this need to better this roster or reimagine this roster. Take your time. I think the biggest thing I would add, I think cap space is a weapon in 2025. And I think we'll get notice of this around the league. We talked about the New York Rangers. There's going to be a lot of examples where teams are trying to flush cap. And that's where I think the Maple Leafs could pounce. They don't necessarily need to pounce on July 1. I think if you play the waiting game, you can find really good value in this market.
Yeah, that's fairly true. And there's a lot of guys that isn't on, the very first page of everyone's radar and everyone's free agent list that go down, the list a little while, where you start to pick out those guys. If, he's got that mentality, he's got that DNA, he could be that guy on our fourth line. Like you say, I mean, you look like a Bobby McMahon and these types of guys. It's kind of like, well, what are you trying to do out there? Like, what are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to score the big goal? That would be nice. How are you trying to go about that? Are you trying to bring the energy and, play physical and put this team on their heels and frustrate them and wear them down and, make a little ozone time out of every shift? And just like, what's your mentality? I didn't really see it out there. It was kind of a little bit of this here and there. And nothing really popped, right? And when you look at the teams playing this time of year, they've all got something that just pops. They know what they're doing. They know how they want to do it. And they just bring it and they just sling that every night. And we are missing that. So like you say, if you got some cap room and some money to work with, they don't need to spend up to the dollar in the first week of July, right? I think you would be short-sighted. I agree with you in thinking that. And there's more than a few ways to skin a cat, right? You can catch those teams that need to dump and are in a jam and have leverage over them. I mean, we don't have a lot of draft picks and a lot of first rounders. We can't do it the conventional way, but you can keep your eyes peeled, hang back in the weeds, as July and August starts to wear on and jump on some opportunities to make your team better. I think Tree's going to have to look to that. And he's no stranger to doing that stuff. He thinks outside of the box, it seems like. And it would be interesting to see some of these depth pieces and pieces that guys aren't talking about on the first page of the paper, potentially come into the fray and the fold and make this team better. But it might not be the most conventional way you're thinking. Another thing that's piquing my interest is the Jonathan Toews situation. Like, what's your thoughts on a player like that, making this odd kind of unprecedented return to the league, at least trying to?
So I checked in on the whole Taves thing yesterday. There's nothing new to report. Still going over teams because I just inquired. I mean, what is he looking for? Is it term? Is it dollars? Everything's up in the air right now. I just know they're deliberating are the Taves camp, and I'm sure we'll get an answer around or maybe even before July 1. Look, on paper, Rosie, it makes a lot of sense. Like, I think he checks a lot of boxes, even a guy who hasn't played in 2+ years. And just the DNA, the fortitude, the pedigree, what this guy could potentially bring to this roster. And let's not forget, there's just so many prime examples. We talk about it with Max Pacioretty all the time. I'm not signing Jonathan Taves to play game 17 of the regular season. I'm signing Jonathan Taves to play game 1 and beyond of the Stanley Cup playoffs. So if you bring in a guy like Taves, I'm just building him up all year long. If that means Taves not playing every game, I'm fine with that. But I think the juice is worth the squeeze because it is Jonathan Taves and because we've seen him play at an elite level. And I think expectations big too here. Like when we talked about Pacioretty, not to compare Pacioretty and Taves, we talked a lot about fit and the expectation. I'm bringing in Jonathan Taves to be a bottom 6 player. If you can have that expectation, I think for sure he can exceed expectations. I mean, again, look at Pacioretty. He came in. A lot of people in this conversation, a lot of people in Leafs Nation weren't a fan of the move, but then we saw the value that a guy like that can bring to the table, right?
Yeah, it's interesting with Taves, man. Like, just when you think of him in like the top echelon of all players, right? You go back to when the Blackhawks, you could call them, it's arguable that they could be like a modern day dynasty in the cap era. I mean, they got 3 cups in 5 years, was it? Like, good Lord, man, all led by that guy being the template for this is how we're going to approach things. He kept their heads on straight. He was the leader, Mr. Serious, Captain Serious. All the rest of it, we know he's clutch. You look at his international record and what he's done. Like, his pedigree is extremely high. What's the kicker? He's not exactly young anymore, and he just came off of this kind of unprecedented pause from the game where, personally and with his health and was figuring some things out, had to literally step back for a considerable period of time to get things right. Whatever those were, great. By all accounts, he did what he needed to do, took his time, stepped away from the game. And I think based on the fact that he did, in fact, do that, it tells me that the fact that he's coming back now, he is ready to rock. He's got his head right. He's got his focus. He's healthy. He's ready to rock. He wants to make a return. To me, I'm like, if you go to Anaheim and make your return, and okay, you play on the third line and you do some stuff, and okay, now you're retired. Like, whoop-de-doo. You know what I mean? It's not really a splash. It's cool to go play with Q again, I'm sure. I'm wondering what he's looking for. Like, does he miss the fact that he was who he was and now he just kind of like limped out and is just kind of just off of everyone's radar now? Or does he want to kind of make a splash? Like, to me, you come to Toronto, he's back. Yeah, expectations are going to be high, but everyone's going to be like, there'll be a bunch of people with no expectations saying this guy's over the hill. He never did this. His points were only that anyway, blah, blah, blah. An opportunity to go do something special on a team that is trending in the right direction. Like, maybe he could be part of something special in Toronto and like really solidify himself as I'm back, remember me, and just put a cherry on top no matter what happens of his career. If it does last a few more years and he's got more to give, I think the potential's there to be pretty cool.
Imagine a Jonathan Toews in the bottom six, like driving the engine, and maybe you put him on a line with Bob McMahon. Like, the combinations are there. I think you would agree with this. If there's a scenario, and we both love Max Domi, maybe love's a strong word, but I like I like Max Domi on this roster. I think if there's a pathway where Domi's not your center or third line or fourth line center next year, I think you're in good shape. But imagine center ice position with hypothetically like, a Matthews, a Tavares, an option like Jonathan Toews up the middle. I think Lawton's going to be better after a full training camp with this team. Like, you have options at the very least. And I love that idea of just reimagining in general that bottom six. Because I agree with Darryl Sutter. The bottom six, there's just significant fall off. And I think we talk about it every year, but it's the big boys and then everybody else. And it was unfortunate that it all came together and nobody could score at the end again.
Well, you're trying to rectify that. That's the whole reason of letting Mitch Marner walk, is you don't have so many eggs in the top couple guys' basket, and it's not so thin below them. You try to get, a little bit more of a robust lineup and spread the wealth a little bit. You have an opportunity for doing that by opening up this cap space that they're inevitably going to have, whether they blow their load on it here in July or not. Obviously, that's Tree Living's department, but with Jonathan Toews, you don't really know what you like. Do you see him jumping in on the power play if he is part of this team and in the bottom six? Like, could he not bring a different element to that, or do you think that's past him now? I guess nobody knows.
Well, it's funny. Nobody knows like what he wants to do, but I was even thinking, like, for example, like a Corey Perry coming in, what that would do to the power play, where you can sort of like mix it up into two units and have like a Corey Perry as a net front presence. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I think it's such like an afterthought, the second power play unit in Toronto, and much the same in Edmonton too. They roll those five guys, but they still have Klingberg running PP2, and they got guys like Henrique on there. But I think that'll be unique to look at from that perspective too. But I think early on, I think Jonathan Toews, the guy in the bottom six, I think a PK look would be something I'd be like. It just all depends. You're right on what he's setting out to do. What are his objectives? Where does he want to play? I still view Winnipeg as the leading contender, and the betting market does too. Even losing Lowry, their captain, for like 6 months, they're very thin up the middle. I think Toews would make a lot of sense there. And I just wonder positionally too, like, does he start in the wing? Does he go right back to center? Like, imagine missing 2 seasons, 2+ years, and then just rolling back out there as a center in the NHL. Like, that's a big ask. But the more and more I dissect this list and I look at a Jonathan Toews, I don't think he's going to cost a lot. Even if you have to give him $500K more, I'd probably do it, Rosie, honestly.
Well, that's the thing with Toews is it's a bit of a roll of the dice, I guess, in a way.
Yeah.
But it's also has the potential for him to far exceed what you have to pay for him, You look at Max Pacioretty, like, why was he such a smart move? Because he cost you nothing. Like, there was no risk.
Yes.
You bring him in on a PTO, he does special things, you give him like a league minimum thing, and then it's like, whatever you do that's good is gravy. Like, you're at league min. And he adopted a new role and had this physicality about him and was a lot of elements of what the Leafs were lacking in the past. He was a fantastic signing. And I think that Jonathan Toews, you're not going to have to pay him $4 million to come in here. It's going to be a, hey, come and prove yourself type of thing. And with his pedigree, I mean, there's just opportunity for him to be, far outplaying his contract and be worth every single cent and then some. And that's what you're looking for. Where on the flip side of the Bennett thing, like everyone's scared because it's like, you're going to overpay this guy. He's inevitably potentially not going to be able to fill the shoes again in the new situation. And then you're stuck with this monster contract for maybe it's a 40-point guy. You know what I mean? That's the risk in there, even though I'm all about Sam Bennett. He's kind of my number one guy on the table. A guy like Taves, you're not really risking that much. You bring him in, and if it doesn't work out, well, he's like what can you get him at? It just depends on how much interest is going to be out there and how many people are thinking the same way. There's potential for that betting to be coming up a little bit, but like you said, if it's an extra $500K, we're talking about $100 million cap here. Like, let's roll that dice, if you ask me.
Indisputably, I agree with you, because I think if you strike out on Taves, it doesn't hurt as much as striking out on a Sam Bennett. And we wouldn't know for a couple of years if you bring in a Bennett and overpay him by $2 million as opposed to Jonathan Taves, it's a shorter term deal. But it'll be interesting over the next couple of weeks. Don't forget, we're about 3 weeks away here from free agency, Rosie.
Yeah, you mentioned Corey Perry. Like, he's 40 years old. I get that's the knock, and he's not the fastest guy in the world, but he never has been. Like, how much more do you have to watch where you're like, he's such a factor? Like, he's just a factor. He drags everyone else into the fight. He's right there all the time, and he's so effective at what he does. Like, would you be interested in him to try to lure him to Toronto? I mean, we talked yesterday about him basically, publicly saying, I want to be a Toronto Maple Leaf, and they couldn't make it happen. Like, could that still be on the table for that guy?
I think so. I think if you're Edmonton, I don't know how you let Corey Perry go. I just think he is so important to the DNA of that team right now, win or loss here in the Stanley Cup final. And again, there's so many determining factors, but Perry's a guy who's already come out and said, win or loss, he wants to play next year at the ripe age of 41 or whatever it is. But I definitely a guy making a call on. I think another prime example of a guy I don't really care what he does in game 37. If you got to sit him half the year, you sit him half the year and get him set for game one of the playoffs. That's where he's the most valuable.
Well, say you go down that road, and you've mentioned that with Taves and then Perry, obviously some older guys that you're coming in and hoping to facilitate that role. You lose Mitch Marner, though, and everyone that's a Marner supporter is saying, oh, you're making it to the playoffs isn't as guaranteed as you think it is without Marner. I'm kind of like, you're going to have to facilitate his 100 points somewhere, no question. But
yeah, but my pushback on that conversation, Rosie, it's like you got, regardless of Marner leaving, you still have two bona fide star players in this league in Matthews and Nylander. If you can't make the Stanley Cup playoffs with those two guys, maybe suggesting that Tavares is not back and you lose Marner, there's bigger fish to fry. I don't subscribe to that conversation. You take Marner off this team, they're somehow going to miss the playoffs. There's bigger issues in Toronto if they can't make the playoffs, losing Marner and still have Matthews and Nylander on their roster. Sorry.
I would agree with you. And I do like the shift of the playoff or the regular season. You like to say it doesn't matter. I like home ice. I like to play the weaker seed, but even more so when it's not a 1-8 structure. I mean, you're playing a good team round one, regardless, kind of, you know what I mean? Like, it's tight within that division, and we've seen it all the time where you got Dallas and Colorado playing each other in the first round. Like, is it worth beating the shit out of yourself for 82 games especially if you've committed to some veteran guys? And as we've talked on this show, the veteran guys seem to be the one who understand how the playoffs work, so it is interesting. But yeah, if you get some of these pieces in play and it's not, hair on fire, winning the Atlantic type of season, I don't think I'm going to be as scared. I mean, Tampa wasn't too scared about it. Florida wasn't scared about it. Edmonton wasn't too scared about it, kind of, getting their ducks in a row, ready for a playoff push, compared to, fighting tooth and nail to game 82 to get yourself in the best spot. And if you go with a bunch of veterans, that might have to be, a reality of not playing these guys 80 games a year and, asking your other guys to step up in the regular season to try to get those 2 points every night.
At the Leafs Nation 401, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It's time now for the crispy hot take of the day, presented by the Ninja Crispy 4-in-1 portable glass air fryer.
Meet the first of its kind, the Ninja Crispy Portable Cooking System. The power of a full-sized air fryer in the palm of your hand, so you can cook big or small batches. Just prep it, crisp it, serve it, and store it all in one.
It is an all-in-one system. It includes 4-quart, 6-cup Tupperware glass containers and 2 storage lids. The Ninja Crispy is thermal shock resistant and go from frozen to crispy in minutes. With the Crispy Power Pod, you get the power of a full-size air fryer in the palm of your hands. The 4-quart container fits 4 pounds of chicken or veggies. Cook a personal-sized meal in 7 minutes in the 6-cup container. Max crisp, bake, air fry, and re-crisp with the Ninja Crispy. You can prep, cook, and store anything from crispy favorites to one-dish meals. Visit their website in the link in the show description or check out ninjakitchen.ca. You ready for today's hot take, Rosie?
Hit me with the hot take this morning.
The Leafs will trade one of their blue liners this summer. Interesting.
Oh, spicy. Interesting, man. Okay, well, it's not Tanev. It's not OEL. I mean, I think a lot of people would like to see Morgan Riley have a change somewhere, but there's no one taking his $7.5 million deal there. I think you need some of the other guys that are down in the depth chart. You just can't, they're out playing their, Simone Benoit, for example, he's out playing his contract. You lose him, you just need to replace him, which is going to be hard. And I really like him and his style and his grit. I think he's got the DNA that they're looking for. One of the guys that do. Their back end looks good to me. Carlo, like Sutsy said, right-handed defenseman. He does some things. I didn't think he looked awesome with Morgan Riley there. Again, they're always trying to find someone to make Morgan Riley better, which makes me want to pull my hair out, because a player like Morgan Riley is supposed to make other people better, but for some reason, no one can play well with Morgan Riley. Getting kind of frustrating, but I just don't. I think that if you can keep your cap space like we talked about, that's kind of your weapon. I know they don't have a lot of draft picks. I know they might have to trade someone to make a deal that's of value. But who do you think who's the first guy? Who's the number one guy you think on the back end who could be involved in a trade if there was one?
I think it's Morgan Riley. The reasoning why there hasn't been conversation is because a report came out 2 weeks ago that Riley would be unwilling to waive. But I think we've seen so many examples in the NHL where if you want a guy to be traded, he's going to be traded. And I think there's ways around that. And I think there could be noise at some point in time, but probably Riley or I think Benoit would be the two logical names if they had to deal a blue liner. Because you can't forget too, I think the trade route could be the direction the Maple Leafs go if they can't get their hands on a Marchand or, a Bennett or upper echelon guys, if you will. I think the trade route's going to be where they're headed. Well, what kind of assets do they have? If you don't want to deal Easton Cowan, who on your roster are you open to dealing? Is it a Bob McMahon? Is it a Lawton? Would you put him back out on the market? Is it would teams take Domi? You start listing names and it's very scarce in terms of assets. So I think you got to be creative. I'm not in favor of it for the record, but I don't think it's as spicy a take as we think. I think there's all possibilities out there.
Yeah, if something comes across Tree's desk and he just can't get it off his mind and it strikes a nerve with him and he just can't get over the fact that he believes that will make his team considerably better, he might go to that well of defensemen where we are pretty heavy. And I like our back end as well, which means I probably don't really want to move it around too much, but there's a reason you like it. It's solid and it's thick and it's deep. Well, maybe that means you can pluck something off if it means you get better in areas that you're a little bit leaner. I could see that happening. And I know we don't have the draft picks to move. It's going to be tough. I hope we can do something that we spoke of earlier. We have cap room. There's going to be teams that get into a cap crunch. They're over the cap. They need to, extend their RFA, and they're just looking at it going, shit, we need this guy off our books. And we're like, well, interesting. We have some cap room, and that guy kind of fits the mold. And you get someone for next to nothing, where before you got to give up assets. So we'll see if Tree can pull something like that off. But yeah, we do know that back end looks pretty healthy and probably attractive to some people. I wouldn't mind being able to move Morgan Riley. You open up his cap room for what he brings to the table these days, even though he was better in playoffs. I'm for it. I'm all ears. I just don't see a lot of people saying, ooh, I've watched Morgan Riley the last couple of years and I really want him at $7.5 million. I'm not sure who that is.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you're definitely not dealing from a position of strength when it comes to Riley. And I like the fact that Toronto's blue line is now a strong point. For like a decade, it hasn't been. And they just really, in short order, have built a really, really strong decor and a strong crease. And now I think it's time this summer to take that next step up front and get some serious depth to that roster. Want to get in the action for Stanley Cup playoffs at Bet365? They got you from game props, player props, totals, and the money line. Whatever your bet is, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Download the app and get in the game. An official partner of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Must be 19 or older. Ontario only. Please play responsibly. If you're someone you know has a gambling problem, visit connexontario.ca. I was telling you before the show, if you're looking into a market, free agency market, and you're able to play different routes, different spots, I've been having a sneaky suspicion for months, and by all accounts, Mitch Marner wants to go to a quieter market. I just feel like the Rangers are going to be bracing for something here. You move Kreider to Anaheim. There's rumors of Banijad's out there, and suddenly what? You have $11 million to spend, or 12 or 13, and there's a lot of moving parts. But I love the value of Mitch Marner to the New York Rangers. If you can find it the way I did, around plus 6,000, I take a look at that. I've sprinkled a bit of coin as well on Jonathan Taves to Winnipeg, Jonathan Taves to Toronto. I like betting on futures, man. Like especially free agency, it's a lot of fun.
That is fun. Well, I like to try to find in my mind, Mitch Marner is not re-signing with the Leafs. And I know that's going to be minus money, but like I would smash that. I think Sutsy said, oh, he thinks I do not think so, man. Everything we've talked about for days on and days end and talking about to these coaches that have won, it's like, well, there's for so many different reasons you have to move on for Mitch Marner. And I wish you could bet. I don't know if you can. I should open my 365 app and see if you can bet will not end up with his, previous team type of thing. I like those bets. It's weird these days with trying to bet on stuff like, especially with these 2-day gaps. Like I can't even make my Bet365 app or bet on the finals here until tomorrow.
Who do you like in Game 3 of the NBA Finals tonight, then? You like Indiana or you like OKC on the road? What's going on here? Let's hear your basketball takes.
Who's playing again? I like that Canadian kid, JESG. He looks
SGA,
he came out of nowhere
SGA.
for me. I don't know much, man, but he just watched a little bit and some highlights. And Canadian kid, he's playing against his cousin, which is kind of cool. A nice Canadian contingency in the final here, I guess in the conference finals for sure. But he looks like a stud. How about that? Is that you can
Shea
see
Gilgeous
the depth
Alexander.
of my basketball. Yeah, let's go OKC with it. They're taking Game 3.
They're heavy favorites after losing Game 1 of that series, and a big reason why the Cup final is not happening tonight. But Indiana plus 180 dog on home court against OKC, and a 5.5 spread in that game. So I probably play the OKC spread. They're a wicked team, man. They should win this year. And I think if you're feeling good, can't forget another Toronto team's doing really, really well right now. The Blue Jays are on fire, plus money on the road in St. Louis to try to finish off the sweep this afternoon for getaway day. Maybe take a look at the Blue Jays at plus money. But Rosie, we'll leave it at that. We're going to talk trade targets on tomorrow's podcast. Looking forward to that.
Interesting. Yeah, looking forward to it. I'll have to do a little research, see if we can dig something, some golden gem out of the depths of the trade market and see if we can get something that's a little bit spicy.
Jason Robertson. Hold the thought for tomorrow, okay? We're talking trade targets tomorrow. Hold that thought for tomorrow.
Sounds good. I'll bite my tongue.
All right, Rosie, excellent stuff. Thank you to everybody in the chat at the Leafs Nation 401. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. A rather contentious chat today. People going at it, people chirping us. They're going fucking ape shit on this chat today. I don't know. People
What are they mad at us about?
Some guys said I blinked too much. There's a couple others who disagreed with your takes on the Leafs or our takes on the Leafs being close. They're fighting over Joseph Wall. There's some people in the chat who want to trade Joseph Wall. Just another day in the chat. I love it.
Me too. I like the hot takes. I like the spiciness. I like the passion. That's what it's all about. Well, let's gather our thoughts for tomorrow as we go over some potential trade targets.
Yes, sir. Leafs Morning Take, wherever you find your podcast. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review. And don't forget to visit theleafsnation.com. Thank you again to Darryl Sutter for dropping by. Thank you to producer Vic. For Jay Rosehill, I'm Nick Alberga, and we'll talk tomorrow. Take care, everybody. Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long-form interviews. We got clips. We got epic rants by Jay Rosehill. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.